Hey, John. That looks like the hill that we stayed on our first night in Waseca County. Do you remember? We made camp up on the top of that hill.
That's right, William. We set up camp that night and had a terrible battle with the mosquitoes. We were aware that there were Indians living all around here who were soon to be pushed off their land. We Irish know something about that.
Yes, indeed. We left Ireland because of the potato famine. But our real trouble started with the English landlords taking all of our land. There was enough food to feed everyone, but our families didn't have enough money to buy that food. We really survived on potatoes, and when the potato blight hit, our food was gone, and many died of starvation. Sadly, our dear parents lost 7 of their 11 children to typhus due to malnutrition. Many were forced to leave beloved Ireland.
That's right. I had to leave our home in the townland of Carrickittle in the parish of Kiltilly, County Limerick, Ireland. Our dear mother was beside herself. I think she feared she would never see me again.
And she never did.
My father sold his last cow for fare to America for me, as I was the oldest son. I came and worked, sending money home when I could. Then, 5 years later, you were able to come, landing in April of 1851, if I remember right.
That's correct.
In New York. I recall that you came by train to Little Washington at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Matt O'Brien and I had a contract to build a turnpike to Waterloo, which we finished that May. We traveled to Christianbury and spent 2 years there building turnpike roads. In November of 1855, we started west on foot to Charleston, West Virginia. Do you remember that?
Yes, of course. Then we traveled down the Kanawha and Ohio rivers to Cincinnati. That was where you married Catherine Murray. I traveled on to Aurora, where I met Catherine O'Mara. I wasn't ready to settle down yet, so I went on to Iowa alone.
Yes, you traveled on, and Catherine and I stayed in Chicago for a while.
The 2 of you soon joined me in the spring of 1856 in Lyons, Iowa. That first winter was frigid, with horrifically low temperatures and chilling winds. We had built our own shanty out of plain boards, and we nearly froze to death. One morning I woke up and my head was frozen to the hard board that I was sleeping on. Quite a few hairs came out. That spring we decided to start from Minnesota with 2 Fitzgerald families and the McGonagalls. Between you and I, we had 2 yokes of oxen, 2 cows, 2 wagons, and all of our worldly goods.
After getting into Minnesota, I remember I never saw a house or a human being until we reached Peddler's Grove in Freedom Township in Waseca. We thought it was a vast and undeveloped land compared to Ireland. William, I remember that you liked the land around Mankato because of the river, but I always preferred the prairie.
That's true. And in June of 1856, we camped on that hill where our beloved St. Mary's would later stand. We rested a little and we selected our claims.
Yes, I had 160 acres in section 21 of St. Mary's Township, about 2 miles north of here. And William, you settled right near me.
Yep. That first year we turned some soil, sowed a little buckwheat, made hay in the fall, and built our log cabins. But we found it difficult to make money. So in November 1859, I went down the Mississippi to get a job bossing on a levee for $60 a month. I married Catherine O'Mara in 1860 at her father's home in Indiana, and then I came back to Minnesota. During the Indian excitement of 1862, do you remember? We used to gather at your house for protection.
I remember how afraid we were.
About 10 families gathered at that time. We put our wagons in a circle, and we camped inside the circle. We placed pickets on the guard outside and camped without a fire. We stayed up all night, but there was no activity. Because of that scare, I had sent my wife to Rochester, where our second child was born a few days later.
We started out farming with oxen, but I remember when you won the horses at the Waseca County Fair in its first year, in 1868. That's when things started getting better for us.
We were raising children and doing the Lord's work, but I remember it was disappointing to not have our own church to go to weekly Mass at. We only had Mass here twice a year, do you remember?
I recall that. We hoped to have a good church on this ground, and eventually one was built.
And we thanked God for that.
Finally, around the 1870s, we started to see much success. We were raising wheat, corn, and potatoes. We had so much success that we were able to send money back to Ireland, to our parents. William, I was never much for writing, but didn't you write letters back home?
Yes, I tried my best to keep our mother and father appraised of what we were doing here. One time I tried to describe to them where we lived and how big the country was. I told them that we were surrounded by a prairie, about 3 miles in diameter, divided by a stream and bordered by trees. I wrote that we settled 400 miles west of Chicago, 1,000 miles west of New York City, and 65 miles from the Mississippi River.
I was so glad that you corresponded, especially after Father died and Mother was alone.
I remember being incredibly sad after Father's death. But as time went on, I also remember you holding school districts and town offices for a number of years.
Yes, I enjoyed doing that. I had a good life raising my family.
Thanks be to God for the good life that we had.
I'm so grateful I was able to farm here, and that my son James is farming near the homestead. And maybe someday one of his children will farm here as well.
Yay.